What is up, everybody, and welcome to FLW Videos. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about the exciting topic of legendary shadow Pokemon being introduced into Pokemon Go. Of course, what it would look like and why it makes a ton of sense for Niantic to do this. So first things first, if you haven't seen this yet, there are now new Pokestops that are owned by Team Rocket that you're going to have to take back by battling them, and then you get a chance at getting yourself one of the shadow Pokemon, and then finally the ultimate goal is to purify them. And when you purify them, they get up to level 25. That's very important to talk about because currently with the Pokemon that we have seen introduced in the first wave, we end up asking ourselves the question, well, what is the point in purifying these Pokemon? Sure, we can get them up to level 25, but when you talk about the starters, of course, we're not going to be able to have access to the Community Day exclusive moves unless we get some type of group Community Day, maybe at the end of the year, who knows, but we're not able to get those movesets, so they're not necessarily worth it. Then when we talk about Pokemon like Snorlax and Crobat, I think Snorlax probably brings up the biggest argument for it being worth it, but all in all, a lot of people are just scratching their heads going, why would I purify these Pokemon? It's going to cost, first off, it's going to cost you Stardust and then Candy to be able to purify these Pokemon. And so you're just sitting there saying, why would I ever want to do this? And I'll be honest with you, I'm in that same boat as well, until I thought about legendary Pokemon. Now let's go ahead and explain how people can, of course, get themselves legendary Pokemon. Of course, we've got the main method where you could do it through raids. And then, of course, through raids, you can grant access to level 20 and then level 25 if these Pokemon are weather boosted. But unfortunately, these Pokemon are not always available in the game. A secondary way to get it is through special research. And now that has been helpful to people who are not able to raid. The big downfall to that is that these Pokemon are unfortunately at level 15. And as many of you know, you kind of look at it as a candy vehicle, right? To just get yourself that Pineapple, get 6 candies, and just move on from it. You're not considering powering it up. But I want to give you a third and alternate perspective, and that is actually related to these Team Rocket Shadow Legendaries and why it would make sense. So let's go ahead and imagine this. By the way, I did make one for all 3 of the Pokemon. Currently, the only 3 that we have in the code so far are the legendary birds, Articuno, Zapdos, and Moltres. I will go ahead and showcase them throughout this video. But first things first, the only type of investment that we would necessarily have to make in it at first is going to be purifying the Pokemon. Alright, makes sense, right? Let's go ahead and purify it. Sure, it's going to cost some Stardust. Sure, it's going to cost some candy. Maybe it'll be like 10 candy, for example. But once we end up doing this, we are going to have to ask ourselves the simple question. Would it be worth it to purify it? And the answer is yes, from a candy perspective, from a Stardust perspective. Because of the mechanic, it automatically puts these Pokemon up to level 25. Now keep that in mind. When we talk about special research, they are down at level 15, so that means if you were to get the Shadow version and then of course unlock it, you would be able to get them up to level 25, which is the equivalent of a raid with the weather boost, automatically getting you up 10 levels just by purifying it. And as far as the cost is concerned, it should end up being significantly less than what it would take for you to power up just a regular one through special research. And then of course, even if you got one just at the regular raid level 20, you are going to save so much resources in this way. The only catch to all of this is going to be centered around the moveset. So let's say you end up getting yourself that Zapdos and then you of course decide to purify it. You've got it in at level 25 now. The only issue is that you're going to have the special move return and you're going to have to unlock that secondary charge move. This is where Shadow Pokemon in the game comes in. Now previously for legendary Pokemon, it would cost you 100 candies to be able to unlock that secondary charge move along with the 100,000 Stardust. But for the most part, a lot of people do not necessarily get held back by the Stardust, they get held back by the candy. So for the discount on the candy, this ended up being true as far as all the Pokemon being introduced. We ended up seeing a 20% discount not only on the Stardust but also for the candy. That even rings true for something like Snorlax, which would initially be at 75. It is now bumped down to 60, representing that 20% discount. So for legendary Pokemon, it would end up being 80 candy versus 100 candy, and then of course 80,000 Stardust versus 100,000 Stardust. So all in total, it's going to be a little bit more than what it would cost for you to be able to just power up your Pokemon from like a level 15 up to a level 25. For example, if you did get it in the field research, but I do think we are on to something. Keep in mind, this is all speculative, assuming that the legendaries would follow the exact same standpoint. I think that the overall cost is not that far off from what we are already seeing in the game though. So I'm going to be very excited to see what it will be like once legendary Pokemon get introduced via the Shadow version. But I want to know what you think about this idea in the comment section below. Do you think that it could end up being worth it? We haven't even considered Lucky. Maybe at that point it definitely would. But I want to know what you think about it in the comment section below, and I will see you next time. This is where we give a huge shout out to the patrons on Patreon. As many of you may not know, as far as YouTube content creators are concerned with smaller channels, you don't make that much money, although there is a lot of hard work that goes into it. So support on Patreon is very important to smaller creators, and I want to say thank you so much for everyone who has chosen to be a part of it.